The stars stretched endlessly across the dark void of space, silent except for the faint hum of a broken alien ship drifting through the nebula. Its hull was cracked, lights flickering like dying fireflies. Inside, a massive shadow lay still, tied to the floor with thick alien chains that glowed faintly with energy. Kareth, the ancient dragon, had been trapped here for years. Its wings were cramped, its scales dulled by neglect, and its eyes carried centuries of pain and patience. Kareth had not always been captive. Once, it had flown across countless worlds, its roar respected by empires and feared by enemies. But because it was sterile, unable to produce offspring, its people, the aliens who once revered it, had abandoned it. They called it useless, mocking its wisdom and strength, leaving it tied to this dying ship as if punishment could erase its existence. For years, it had survived on whatever water and scraps the failing ship could provide. It had prayed quietly, hoping someone, anyone, would hear. On a small exploration mission, human engineer Leora's shuttle approached the derelict ship. Most humans avoided alien wrecks. The dangers were too great and stories of traps and rogue security systems kept many away. But Leora was curious, drawn by the faint energy signatures and the strange aura of the ancient vessel. Her shuttle glided closer, scanning the ship's hull. It was enormous, far larger than anything she had worked on before, but what drew her most was the faint, steady pulse of energy from within. Someone, or something, was alive. She docked carefully, airlock sealing with a hiss. The interior was dark, dust motes drifting in shafts of dim light. Her boots echoed as she moved, careful not to trigger broken sensors or collapse panels. The chains holding Kareth glowed faintly ahead, massive enough to crush a human instantly. She froze when she saw the dragon's head lift slightly, its eyes opening and reflecting the dim light like twin molten suns. It did not roar. It did not attack. It simply watched, and in that watchful gaze she felt both sorrow and intelligence. Most humans would have panicked or run. Most aliens would have mocked or struck. But Leora did neither. She stepped forward, scanning the chains and consoles around them. "I can help," she whispered softly, as if the dragon could hear her through thought rather than sound. Kareth tilted its head, watching her carefully, sensing that this human was different, brave, patient, and clever. The chains had held it for years but not its will. She knelt beside a console, running scans. The alien systems were ancient, failing in random cycles. Energy leaks flickered along the hull, threatening to shut down entirely. With a careful hand, Leora began rerouting power, stabilizing the faint energy running through the chains. Kareth remained still, testing her patience, testing her skill. The dragon's claws scratched lightly against the floor, a subtle warning: any wrong move and the chains could shock or injure her. But she moved carefully, guided by logic, instinct, and respect for the immense creature before her. Hours passed as Leora worked. The dragon watched every move, learning from her. It sensed no fear in her hands, only precision and purpose. Occasionally, it twitched its tail, the length of it knocking over broken panels, but it did not strike. The respect in its silence was earned, not given. Slowly, the chains began to loosen, energy flowing more steadily, wires repaired enough to prevent sudden shocks. The first small step toward freedom had been taken. During a brief pause, Leora reached for a container of water she had brought from her shuttle. "You must be thirsty," she said, tilting it so the dragon could lap at it carefully. Kareth lowered its massive head, drinking slowly. Its movements were gentle, though every motion carried immense strength. This human had not recoiled. She had not mocked. She had not sought reward. She had acted as few ever did, with understanding and courage. The dragon's chest rumbled softly, a sound like distant thunder, not of anger but of acknowledgement. Outside, the nebula glowed with swirling colors, violet and gold, like cosmic fire. The broken ship drifted slowly through the haze, forgotten by most of the galaxy. But inside, a spark of hope had ignited. The dragon, tied and forgotten for centuries, sensed that its prayers might finally be answered. Humans were small, fragile, and underestimated, but this one, this clever, daring human, might just change everything. Leora worked into the night, stabilizing engines and clearing debris. She mapped escape routes, tested broken systems, and avoided triggering ancient security protocols. The dragon observed quietly, letting her take the lead. It had been powerless for years, but it could see the future in glimpses through this human skill and calm mind. For the first time in decades, it imagined flying freely again, soaring across the stars without chains. Finally, as the first faint glow of a distant star appeared on the horizon, Kareth flexed its wings slightly, testing the space around it. The chains no longer bound it completely. The dragon's gaze met Leora's, a silent communication passing between them, a mixture of gratitude, recognition, and a cautious trust. She smiled, wiping sweat from her brow. "Not long now," she whispered. "We'll get you free." The ancient dragon, once abandoned and mocked for its sterility, lifted its head higher. It had survived centuries through patience, strength, and wisdom. Now, with a human who acted with courage, intelligence, and quiet respect, it finally saw a path forward. Its prayers, silent for so long, were beginning to be answered. The broken ship was no longer just a prison. It was the start of freedom, the beginning of a new chapter in the galaxy for both dragon and human. Outside, the nebula shifted and the stars waited. Inside, an unlikely alliance had formed, one of patience, ingenuity, and courage. Kareth stretched its wings fully for the first time in years, brushing against broken metal, feeling the power of life returning. The galaxy had underestimated humans, but this one had shown that even the smallest hand could unlock freedom for the mightiest dragon. And for the first time in centuries, the ancient dragon hoped again. Leora worked carefully as the glow from distant stars filtered through the cracked windows of the broken ship. Kareth, the ancient dragon, lay quietly, watching her with eyes that held centuries of wisdom and pain. The chains still restrained its massive form, but they no longer glowed with the harsh energy they once had. Slowly, carefully, she adjusted wires and circuits, stabilizing the failing power systems. Every movement she made was deliberate. One mistake could shock her, or worse, startle the dragon. For years, Kareth had been tied to this drifting wreck, mocked by the alien species that had captured it for being sterile. They had left it here to die, forgotten among the stars. But this human, small and fragile in appearance, moved with confidence, calmness, and precision. It was different from the others. Kareth tilted its massive head, observing her every action. It could feel the intelligence in her hands, the thought behind each adjustment. "Almost there," Leora whispered to herself, tightening a loose connector on the main console. Sparks flared briefly and the chains hummed softly. The dragon flexed a claw, testing the restraint. It could have lashed out, shattered the consoles, and made her retreat, but it did not. Instead, it waited, sensing something in her that no other human, or alien, had ever shown: courage and respect. Leora paused, taking a step back. She studied Kareth carefully. Its scales were cracked and faded, wings folded in unnatural angles, eyes full of quiet longing. Most humans would have turned away, intimidated by the sheer size and age of the dragon. Most aliens would have mocked it or exploited its weakness. But she felt no fear. Instead, she felt curiosity and determination. This creature deserved help and she could provide it. The dragon's gaze followed her as she approached a secondary console. Its large head moved slowly, nostrils flaring as it studied her. Then, in a gesture of cautious trust, it lowered a claw slightly, brushing a section of the hull. It was subtle, but it meant something. Kareth had lived for centuries, judged by appearances, mocked for being sterile, and left helpless. Yet here, a human approached without fear, without mockery, without greed. That simple act was more powerful than any chain or threat. Leora smiled faintly, noticing the gesture. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said softly. "I just want to help." She extended her hand, showing she carried no tools that could harm. Kareth studied her again, the weight of its ancient wisdom measuring her intentions. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, it lowered its massive head closer to her. Its warm breath brushed past her, a reminder of its immense size, yet also its restraint. Hours passed as they worked together, though the dragon did not speak in words. It watched, learning from her, and in small ways assisted. A flick of a tail moved a fallen panel aside. A careful shift of a claw helped stabilize a console. Every motion was measured. Kareth understood that brute strength alone could not restore the ship. Intelligence and careful planning were required. Humans, fragile as they seemed, had an edge in creativity and patience. Leora demonstrated both. When a section of the ship's main system sparked dangerously, Kareth tensed. Its roar could have destroyed the area, but it did not. Instead, it waited for her to act. Leora knelt and adjusted a power relay, her hands steady. The danger passed, and the dragon exhaled, a low rumble of relief. Trust had been earned, slowly and quietly. By the time the artificial lights in the ship stabilized, a bond had formed. Kareth's gaze softened, no longer filled with only pain and caution, but with recognition. This human was different. It was not size, strength, or appearance that mattered. It was intelligence, courage, and respect. Kareth flexed its wings slightly, testing the chains again. They were looser than before, thanks to her careful rerouting of energy flows. Almost free, Leora murmured, checking her instruments. She paused to look at the dragon, feeling awe and respect. I don't know how long you've been here, but I'll get you out. Kareth's massive head lowered toward her in acknowledgement. Its long years of suffering had taught patience, but it could sense that this human could finally answer its silent prayers. A soft hum began in the ship as more systems came back online. Lights flickered across the hull, illuminating the dragon's scales. The chains still held it, but they no longer held its hope. Kareth flexed its wings again, testing the air currents inside the ship. For the first time in years, it imagined soaring, free from these constraints. As the night of stars stretched outside, Leora and Kareth continued their quiet work. She repaired more of the ship, rerouting energy, testing consoles, and cautiously adjusting restraints. The dragon assisted when necessary, moving objects too large for her. Neither spoke much, yet a silent understanding passed between them. She respected its strength and wisdom, and it recognized her courage and ingenuity. By the time her shuttle's instruments indicated the ship was stable, Kareth had learned to trust this human fully. It lowered its head completely, allowing her to inspect the chains without fear. She smiled faintly, adjusting the final power flows. Tomorrow we begin the real work, she said. We get you out of these chains and back to the stars. The dragon rumbled softly, a sound like distant thunder mixed with a sigh of relief. It had prayed silently for centuries, waiting for someone who would see beyond its sterility, its weakness, its captivity. And now, finally, a human had arrived. Not for fame, not for reward, but out of courage and respect. Outside, the nebula glowed like fire and ice. Inside, an ancient dragon and a human engineer prepared for the impossible task of restoring a ship that had been dead for decades. The first contact had been made, trust earned, and a plan for freedom quietly began to take shape. The stars waited, patient and endless, as hope returned to the dragon that had been captive for too long. The ship creaked and groaned as Leora worked through the alien systems. Sparks flickered along the walls, and a low hum of failing power echoed through the corridors. Kareth, the ancient dragon, flexed its massive wings, testing the space around it. Its eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light, watched her every move. Years of captivity had taught it patience, but this human's courage impressed it more than any ally it had ever known. Almost there, Leora whispered, adjusting a power conduit. The ship's systems were fragile, corroded by time and neglect. One wrong move and the entire vessel could fail, collapsing around them. The dragon lowered its head slightly, as if to remind her to be careful. Its chains rattled with subtle tension, though the energy that once pulsed through them was mostly redirected by her repairs. Outside the ship, sensors blinked faintly in the nebula's mist. Leora paused to scan the perimeter. Rival scavengers, drawn by the energy signature of the ancient dragon, were approaching. They were greedy and reckless, expecting a helpless captive or a prize to claim. They would not understand the bond forming inside the derelict ship, or the cunning of a human who refused to be intimidated. We need a plan, Leora muttered, crouching by the control console. Kareth flexed a claw, helping push aside a collapsed panel that blocked part of the circuitry. Its massive size could crush her in an instant, but it was gentle, precise. It understood her intent, just as she understood its limitations. Together, they had begun to synchronize their efforts, human ingenuity paired with dragon strength and instinct. The first challenge came as a surge of energy passed through the ship's failing systems. Sparks flew and a low rumble shook the hull. Leora's hands moved quickly, rerouting power to secondary conduits. Kareth's wings flared slightly, knocking aside debris, providing space for her to work. The dragon had been confined for years, but its mind remained sharp. It calculated risks faster than most humans could, sensing weak points in the failing structure. "You're incredible," Leora whispered, not taking her eyes off the consoles. The dragon rumbled, acknowledging her words without sound. Years of isolation had taught it restraint. It could have destroyed the ship in anger or frustration. Instead, it worked with her, lending power where she could not reach and stability where her hands were too small. Suddenly, the sensors outside flared with detection signals. The scavengers had arrived sooner than expected. Leora froze for a moment, then quickly devised a strategy. "We can't fight them head-on," she said. "We have to outsmart them." Kareth lowered its massive head, flexing its claws and wings. It understood immediately, brute force alone would not save them. They needed intelligence, speed and timing. Leora instructed the dragon to move slowly, careful not to trigger the failing sensors in the ship's hull. Together, they created distractions, shifting panels, triggering false energy signals, and using the dragon's immense shadow to mislead the scanners. The scavengers approached, scanning the ship, but each attempt to locate the dragon failed. Karith's size could have revealed them, but Leora's clever rerouting of power and movement through the corridors kept them hidden. The ship's hull began to stabilize as more circuits were repaired. Karith tested its chains again, flexing its wings fully this time. Sparks flew where old metal had worn thin, but Leora quickly diverted energy to prevent overload. The dragon's patience and strength combined with her intelligence allowed them to overcome obstacles that neither could manage alone. A sudden alarm sounded. An old security protocol reactivated after decades of neglect. Lights flashed and energy surged through a nearby corridor. Leora ducked, moving quickly to reroute the power, while Karith's tail slammed into the floor, diverting debris and shielding her from potential injury. The dragon's awareness of its surroundings, paired with human quick thinking, created a harmony that could not have been predicted. Hours passed as they worked, the scavengers growing restless outside. They did not understand the bond forming inside the derelict ship, or the careful coordination between human and dragon. Leora moved through narrow corridors, adjusting energy flows, repairing broken circuits, and testing the systems. Karith shifted its massive body to provide stability, clearing blocked conduits and lifting damaged panels with ease. Finally, a significant section of the ship hummed with renewed power. Lights flickered to life along the corridors, systems that had been dormant for centuries began functioning again. Karith flexed its wings and tail, testing the movement of the ship. The chains no longer restricted its full power, though they still restrained it partially. Leora smiled faintly. "We did it," she said. "We can move soon." The dragon lowered its head, touching her shoulder gently in acknowledgement. It had prayed for freedom for centuries, tied to this broken vessel and mocked for being sterile. And now, thanks to the courage, intelligence, and cleverness of a single human, it felt hope returning. Karith had faced countless enemies and endured isolation, yet it recognized the rare quality in Leora, a mind capable of matching its own patience and foresight. Outside, the scavengers scanned the ship one last time. They detected nothing. Leora had created enough false signals, and Karith's presence, though enormous, was hidden by clever manipulation of energy flows and shadows. The scavengers, frustrated and impatient, retreated, underestimating the combination of human ingenuity and dragon power. Inside the ship, the dragon flexed its wings fully for the first time in years. Leora adjusted the final conduits, stabilizing the core. The ship hummed steadily, a sign that they were one step closer to freedom. Karith lowered its massive head, watching her carefully. The years of captivity, mockery, and solitude had not broken its spirit, but this human had ignited something it had thought lost: hope and trust. As the nebula swirled outside, casting colors across the cracked windows, the first true bond between dragon and human solidified. Leora's courage, intelligence, and patience had met centuries of wisdom, strength, and instinct. Together they had overcome the first real challenge, restoring the broken systems while evading enemies that sought to exploit weakness. Karith rumbled softly, almost like a sigh of relief. It had been tied and ignored for years, but now it sensed that freedom was within reach. The dragon's prayers, silent for so long, were beginning to be answered. And the human beside it, clever, brave, and steadfast, had proven that even the smallest mind could overcome the greatest obstacles when guided by intelligence and courage. Tomorrow they would face the next challenge, moving the ancient ship through the nebula, escaping the scavengers entirely, and finally taking to the stars. But tonight, for the first time in decades, the dragon felt the stirrings of hope, and the human engineer proved that ingenuity, courage, and respect were enough to challenge the vast dangers of the galaxy. The broken ship drifted silently through the nebula, its hull patched but still scarred from years of neglect. Leora moved carefully along the corridors, checking the systems she had repaired. Sparks flickered occasionally, but nothing threatened to stop them now. Karith, the ancient dragon, flexed its wings in the dim light, testing movement that had been impossible for decades. Each stretch was cautious, precise, a reminder of strength long forgotten and wisdom tempered by centuries of survival. 4 years, Karith had been tied to this vessel, mocked for being sterile, for being useless by the aliens that had captured it. But now, with a human at its side, it felt a flicker of hope it had not known for centuries. Leora's calm intelligence and careful hands had restored more than circuits and energy flows, they had restored trust. The dragon lowered its massive head as she approached, eyes soft with recognition and something close to gratitude. "We're almost ready," Leora said softly, kneeling to check a control panel. "Just a few more adjustments and the ship will be able to move under your power." Kareth rumbled low in its throat, a sound of anticipation and patience. It had endured years of neglect, yet now it could finally feel its strength returning. Its wings stretched, brushing against the ship's walls, and its tail moved with precision, carefully avoiding the fragile panels. Leora smiled faintly, impressed by the dragon's control. "You've still got it," she whispered. "All that time tied down, you didn't forget." The dragon's gaze softened, acknowledging her words. It had been long since anyone had recognized its worth, long since anyone had acted without fear or ridicule. Humans were small and fragile in appearance, yet this one had moved with cleverness and courage, repairing a ship that had seemed impossible to fix. The first test came when she attempted to bring the engines online. The alien technology was ancient, almost alien to her own experience, but Leora's mind worked like a machine, learning, adapting, and adjusting. She carefully routed power from the ship's core to the engines, while Kareth used its massive claws to stabilize heavy panels and support delicate conduits. Sparks flew and alarms sounded briefly, but they worked together, instinct and intelligence in perfect harmony. Kareth's wings flared, brushing the ceiling as the engines hummed to life. For the first time in decades, the ship vibrated with real power. Leora's hands danced across controls, adjusting energy flows, balancing the core and stabilizing the hull. The dragon tested its wings again, moving carefully in the limited space. It could feel the strength returning, the ability to soar across the stars, free from the chains that had bound it for so long. "You're incredible," Leora said, glancing up at the massive creature. Kareth rumbled in response, a sound that spoke of patience, recognition, and respect. It had waited centuries for someone who could restore its freedom, someone who could understand that its worth was more than its ability to reproduce. This human had seen past the chains, past the mockery, and treated the dragon as it deserved, with patience, respect, and intelligence. As the ship's system stabilized, Kareth began to explore the vessel further. It tested gravity controls, flexed its wings against the interior, and touched consoles with claws so large they could have crushed most technology. Yet the ship held firm. Leora guided it patiently, showing how to avoid damaging the fragile repairs. Slowly, the dragon understood that this human was not only clever but adaptable, able to think quickly under pressure. For hours they worked together. Kareth's movements were careful, precise, while Leora adjusted controls, repaired circuits, and rerouted failing power systems. Outside, the nebulous colors swirled, violet, gold, and crimson, casting light across the ship's interior. The dragon flexed its tail, knocking aside old debris and helping clear passages. Each motion was measured, a careful combination of strength and intelligence. Together they were awakening not just the ship but the dragon itself. Finally the engines roared steadily, a sound that had not been heard in decades. Kareth rumbled deeply, the vibration shaking the floor slightly, yet controlled, deliberate. It had tested its strength, tested the ship, and found both ready. Leora checked the systems one last time, smiling. "We're ready," she said. "You can move when you want. No chains, no restraints. You're free." The dragon lifted its massive head, eyes bright with anticipation. For centuries it had been powerless, tied and mocked. Now, with a human who had proven clever, brave and patient, it could finally rise. Its wings stretched fully, brushing the walls and ceiling, and then carefully, it tested the ship's movement. The vessel responded perfectly, gliding slowly through the nebula. Freedom was near. Kareth lowered its head to Leora, a gesture of acknowledgement and gratitude. It had survived centuries of captivity, endured mockery and neglect, and now found a partner who understood strength, patience, and intelligence. Together, they had awakened the ancient ship and restored power to a dragon long thought useless. Its prayers, silent for so long, were finally being answered. Leora stepped back, watching as Kareth tested the engines and wings, preparing for the moment it could truly soar. The human engineer had proven that ingenuity and courage could match even the greatest strength. Kareth's rumbles filled the ship, vibrating with life and power, while outside the nebula's light reflected off the hull, painting the dragon in colors of hope and freedom. For the first time in decades, the dragon's heart felt light. The chains that had bound it for so long were broken, not just physically but in spirit. Leora had shown that humans, small and underestimated, could achieve extraordinary things when guided by intelligence, patience, and courage. Kareth flexed its wings once more, testing every movement carefully, feeling the power returning, ready to leave the nebula and take to the stars. As the stars stretched endlessly around them, the dragon and human prepared for what came next. The ship was no longer just a relic. It was a vessel of freedom, intelligence, and strength. Caritha's prayers were being answered, and Leora's ingenuity had proven the value of humans in a galaxy that often underestimated them. Together, they were ready to face whatever challenges awaited beyond the nebula. The engines of the ancient ship thrummed steadily as Carith stretched its massive wings inside the vessel. The chains that had bound it for decades were gone, replaced by freedom and trust. Leora moved beside the dragon, her hands flying over the controls to stabilize the engines and test navigation systems. The nebula stretched endlessly outside, a swirl of violet and gold, hiding dangers and possibilities alike. "Ready?" she asked softly, glancing at Carith. The dragon rumbled, flexing its wings and tail. Its massive claws pressed against the reinforced floor for balance. It had waited centuries for this moment, tied and forgotten, mocked for being sterile and useless. And now, with a human at its side, it could finally soar once more. Slowly the ship rose, gliding through the nebula with surprising grace. The alien systems responded perfectly to Leora's adjustments and Caritha's powerful movements. Outside, scavengers who had once followed the ship appeared on sensors, hoping to claim the dragon or the vessel for themselves. They were surprised to see the ship moving under its own power and even more shocked to realize that a dragon commanded it. "They're coming," Leora whispered, adjusting the shields. Carith flared its wings, shifting the massive ship to avoid detection. The scavengers fired energy pulses, but Leora had rerouted power to defensive systems, creating mirrored energy signatures to mislead them. Carith flexed its tail, nudging panels and controlling airflow to stabilize the ship as it dodged attacks. The human and dragon worked in perfect harmony, intelligence meeting strength. The scavengers pressed harder, thinking brute force would be enough. Caritha's roar filled the interior, vibrating through the hull and startling the intruders. Leora seized the moment, sending bursts of energy to the ship's engines. The vessel responded with a sudden surge, twisting and weaving through the nebula at speeds the scavengers could not match. They underestimated both the dragon's power and the human's cunning. As the immediate threat passed, the ship cleared the dense clouds of the nebula, revealing open space dotted with stars. Carith flexed its wings fully, testing movement that had been impossible for decades. Every stretch, every flap was precise, controlled, and powerful. It could feel life returning, freedom pulsing through its body. For centuries, it had prayed for this moment. The human beside it, small and clever, had made it real. Leora studied the controls, amazed at the ship's response to Caritha's strength. "We make a good team," she said quietly. The dragon rumbled softly in agreement. Together they had overcome neglect, danger, and underestimation. The galaxy had mocked Carith for its sterility, but it had proven that patience, strength, and wisdom mattered far more than any physical trait. And the human had shown that ingenuity and courage could change fate. They traveled for hours, testing systems and flight. Carith learned to maneuver in the zero gravity of space, guiding the ship with tail and wing movements that complemented Leora's precise calculations. They shared an unspoken understanding. She trusted its instincts and it respected her intelligence. Every movement was deliberate, every adjustment a testament to teamwork and trust. Eventually, they approached a distant star system that could serve as a safe haven. Carith hovered near the ship's entrance to the system, testing defenses against potential patrols or scavengers. Leora prepared sensors and shields while the dragon flexed wings and tail. The bond between them was no longer tentative. It was forged in patience, danger, and shared triumph. As they entered the system, a faint transmission reached them. Other ships, allies of the dragon's long-lost empire, had received signals from the ancient vessel. They were coming to assist, to provide repairs, and to acknowledge the dragon's return. Caritha's massive head lowered slightly in gratitude and Leora smiled. The journey had been dangerous, uncertain, but together they had succeeded where neither could have alone. The dragon finally rose fully above the ship's interior, wings stretching across the hull. It could feel strength returning, life surging through its body, and freedom pulsing in every movement. Leora adjusted the engines for full acceleration, and the ship responded immediately, gliding smoothly toward the welcoming fleet. The nebula receded behind them, a reminder of the trials they had faced together. Carith exhaled, a low rumble of satisfaction and relief. It had endured centuries of isolation, ridicule, and captivity. But now, with this human beside it, the dragon was free. Its prayers, silent for decades, had been answered. And the human, clever and brave, had shown that even the smallest hand could change the fate of the mightiest creature in the galaxy. As the ship joined the approaching fleet, Leora glanced at Kareth. "We did it," she said quietly. The dragon's eyes met hers, intelligent and warm. No words were needed. They had proven that courage, ingenuity, and trust could overcome any obstacle. The galaxy had underestimated both of them, but together they had changed everything. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, bright and infinite. Kareth flexed wings once more, testing the open space around the vessel. Leora monitored the ship, making minor adjustments, but it was clear that the dragon now commanded its freedom. They had survived centuries of neglect and mockery, faced dangers, and restored life to a forgotten vessel. For the first time in decades, Kareth felt the exhilaration of true flight. It soared with Leora beside it, no chains, no restrictions, only freedom and trust. The ancient dragon and the human engineer had become more than allies. They were partners, united by courage, intelligence, and respect. The galaxy could underestimate humans, the dragon thought, but together they had proven that patience, cleverness, and honor were more powerful than any weapon. The ship glided smoothly through the starfield, engines steady, shields operational, and the nebula fading behind. Kareth stretched one final time, wings full, tail steady, eyes bright. Leora watched with pride, knowing that this was just the beginning. Together they would explore the stars, free from chains and mockery, a symbol of what courage and intelligence could achieve. And in that quiet, endless expanse of space, the dragon's prayers had finally been answered, and humanity's ingenuity had secured a new legend among the stars. The ancient dragon soared free, not alone, but with a human who had shown that even the smallest mind could unlock the greatest power.